Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands with an old cloth. The engine room of the USS Horizon hummed quietly around him. He liked the sound. It meant everything was working as it should. The lights blinked green on all the control panels. The quantum drive pulsed with steady power. Jake had made sure of that. Up on the bridge, Captain Lisa Bennett was dealing with their visitors. Jake could hear her voice through the COM system. She sounded calm, but he knew her well enough to hear the worry underneath. The visitors were not friendly. 3 hours ago, the Horizon had dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 442. It was supposed to be a routine exploration mission. They were looking for new planets that humans could live on. Instead, they found something else waiting for them. The Zephyrian dreadnought was huge. It was 10 times bigger than the Horizon. Its hull was black and covered with weapons. When it first appeared on their screens, the bridge crew had gone quiet. Even Lieutenant Commander Steve Rogers, who never seemed afraid of anything, had taken a step back from his station. Jake had been in the engine room when the first message came through. The voice was deep and harsh, like metal scraping against stone. It spoke in broken English, but the meaning was clear enough. The Zephyrians wanted to talk. Or rather, they wanted to give orders. Now Jake worked on his modifications while he listened to the conversation above. Captain Bennett was trying to be diplomatic. She offered friendship, trade, and knowledge sharing. She spoke about peace between their species. Jake admired her for trying, but he could tell it was not working. The Zephyrian commander called himself War Prime Crystal. His voice got louder with each transmission. He called humans soft flesh creatures and weak star crawlers. He said the Zephyrian Empire had conquered 47 star systems. He said they had never met a species worth talking to as equals. Jake pulled out a panel and began rewiring the power conduits. His hands moved quickly and surely. He had been working on ships since he was 16. His father had been an engineer too, back on Mars colony. Jake had learned to fix things before he learned to talk about them. Dr. Amy Carter came down to the engine room during the second hour of talks. She was the ship's expert on alien life. Her face was pale and worried. "Jake, you need to see this," she said. She held up her tablet. It showed pictures of Zephyrian warriors. They were 8 feet tall with bodies covered in crystal-like shells. Their hands ended in claws that could cut through metal. Their eyes glowed red in their angular faces. "They are strong," Amy said, "much stronger than humans. And they have been fighting wars for thousands of years. They do not understand peace. They only understand power." Jake looked at the pictures for a moment, then went back to his work. He pulled more wires free and began connecting them to new circuits he had built. "What are you doing?" Amy asked. Jake did not answer right away. He finished connecting 3 more wires before he spoke. "Making sure we can defend ourselves," he said simply. Amy watched him work. She had known Jake for 2 years, ever since she joined the Horizon crew. He was always quiet, always working. While other people talked about problems, Jake solved them. While others made speeches about what should be done, Jake did what needed to be done. The conversation on the bridge was getting worse. War Prime. Crystal was growing impatient. He told Captain Bennett that humans were wasting his time. He said the Zephyrian Empire did not need anything from primitive mammals. He said humans should feel honored that the Empire had even bothered to talk to them. Captain Bennett tried a different approach. She offered to share human medical knowledge. She mentioned that human doctors had found cures for many diseases. Maybe the Zephyrians had sick people who could be helped. War-Prime Crystal laughed. It was a harsh sound, like breaking glass. He said Zephyrians did not get sick. He said they were superior to humans in every way. Strong flesh, strong weapons, strong ships. He said humans were lucky that he was in a good mood today. Jake had finished his modifications to the power system. Now he was working on the shield generators. The Horizon's shields were good enough for space debris and radiation. They were not good enough for military weapons. But Jake was changing that. He rerouted power from the life support systems. The crew would not notice. The ship could run on backup life support for days. He took power from the recreational areas, the research labs, and even the kitchen systems. Every spare bit of energy was being directed to a new purpose. Amy was still watching him. "The captain is running out of options," she said. "Crichton is not listening to anything she says." Jake nodded but kept working. He was installing new control circuits now. His design was different from anything in the standard manuals. He had been thinking about this kind of problem for years. How do you defend against an enemy that is much stronger than you? How do you survive when you cannot win a fair fight? The answer was simple. You do not fight fair. The final message from War Prime Crichton came through just as Jake finished his last connection. The Zephyrian commander was done talking. He said humans had 72 hours to leave the system. All humans. Not just the Horizon, but any human ships or colonies within 50 light years. If humans were still in Zephyrian space after 72 hours, the Empire would remove them. War Prime Crichton said this would not be pleasant for the humans. He said the Empire had many ways to deal with inferior species. Some of those ways were quick. Others were not. The transmission ended with a threat. Crichton said the Zephyrian fleet was coming. 12 warships, all bigger and more powerful than anything humans had ever built. They would arrive in 3 days. Humans could surrender and become slaves, or they could resist and be destroyed. Those were the only choices. Captain Bennett called for an emergency meeting. Jake could hear people rushing around on the upper decks. Officers were shouting orders. Someone was crying. The whole ship felt different now, heavy with fear and worry. But down in the engine room, Jake Morrison just smiled quietly and tested his circuits one more time. Everything was working perfectly. The Zephyrians were coming with 12 warships, and enough firepower to destroy a planet. Jake was ready for them. The 3 days passed quickly. Jake spent most of his time in the engine room, making final adjustments to his modifications. He barely slept and ate only when Amy brought him food. The other crew members were getting more nervous with each passing hour, but Jake remained calm. Captain Bennett tried to contact Earth Command, but they were too far away. Any message would take weeks to reach home. The Horizon was on its own, just like Jake had expected. He preferred it that way. When you could only depend on yourself, you knew exactly what you were working with. On the morning of the 3rd day, the Zephyrian fleet arrived. The bridge crew watched in silence as 12 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace. Each ship was bigger than the Horizon. Together, they carried enough weapons to turn a small moon into dust. Jake was at his control station in the engine room. He had built new panels and displays over the past 3 days. Wires and circuits covered every surface. It looked like chaos, but Jake knew where everything was. He had designed it all himself. The main view screen in the engine room showed the Zephyrian fleet forming up in attack formation. The ships were beautiful in a deadly way. Their black hulls reflected the light from the nearby star. Weapon ports glowed red along their sides. These were ships built for war, nothing else. War Prime Crichton's voice came over the comm system. He sounded pleased with himself. "Humans of the vessel Horizon," he said. "You did not leave as ordered. This shows either courage or stupidity. We will soon learn which." Captain Bennett responded from the bridge. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension. "War Prime Crichton, we ask you to reconsider. We offer no threat to your empire. We seek only peaceful exploration and friendship between our peoples." Crichton laughed, that harsh breaking glass sound again. "Friendship? You speak of friendship with prey? A hunter does not befriend the animal he is about to kill. You have Weapons, we have detected them. You plan to fight us. This is good. A battle will be more entertaining than simple execution. Jake smiled at that. The Zephyrians had found the Horizon's standard weapons. Pulse cannons, missile tubes, and basic shields, nothing special. Nothing that would worry a warship. They had no idea what Jake had really built. This is your final chance, Crystal continued. Surrender now, and some of your crew may live to serve the Empire. Your scientists and engineers could be useful. The rest will be disposed of quickly. This is Mercy. Captain Bennett looked at her tactical display. Lieutenant Commander Steve Rogers shook his head. They were outnumbered 12-1. The enemy ships each had 10 times their firepower. By any normal calculation, the Horizon was already dead. We cannot surrender, Bennett said quietly. Prepare for combat. The first Zephyrian ship opened fire immediately. A massive plasma bolt streaked across space toward the Horizon. On the bridge, everyone braced for impact. The ship's computer calculated that their shields would last maybe 10 seconds against that level of firepower. But something strange happened. The plasma bolt hit the Horizon's shields and simply disappeared. There was no explosion, no shockwave, no damage. The energy just vanished as if it had never existed. On the bridge, Steve Rogers stared at his instruments. Captain, I'm reading something impossible. The enemy fire is being absorbed by our shields. Not deflected or dispersed. Absorbed. More. Plasma bolts followed, then particle beams. Then fusion missiles. The Zephyrian fleet was throwing everything they had at the small human ship. The space around the Horizon lit up with deadly energy. But none of it got through. Jake's voice came calmly over the intercom. All hands, brace for defensive action. His tone was the same as if he were announcing dinner time. Captain Bennett looked at her displays in amazement. The Horizon's shields were not just holding, they were getting stronger. With each enemy attack, they glowed brighter. The blue energy field around the ship was pulsing like a heartbeat. War Prime. Crystal's confusion came through clearly in his next transmission. What trickery is this? Our weapons are the finest in the galaxy. They have destroyed countless enemies. How do you resist them? Jake did not answer. He was too busy watching his control panels. Every weapon that hit the Horizon's shields was being converted into stored energy. The system was working exactly as he had designed it. The Zephyrians were charging up his weapon for him. The enemy fleet changed tactics. Instead of spreading their fire, all 12 ships focused on the same spot. The combined firepower would have melted through a battle station's armor. The Horizon just absorbed it all and asked for more. Jake's modifications were beautiful in their simplicity. He had turned the ship's shields into a massive capacitor. Every joule of incoming energy was captured, stored, and converted. The defensive grid was now holding enough power to light up a small city for a year. Energy storage at maximum capacity, Jake announced over the comm. His voice was still calm, but there was something else now. Satisfaction. Initiating discharge sequence. The Zephyrians had stopped firing. Their weapons were overheated, and their crews were probably confused. In all their conquests, they had never seen anything like this. War Prime Crystal was shouting orders, but his ships were not responding fast enough. Jake pressed a single button on his control panel. A beam of pure blue energy lanced out from the Horizon. It was thin, precise, and incredibly focused. It struck the flagship's shield generators and burned through them in half a second. Then it carved through the weapon systems, the engines, and the main power core. The entire sequence took less than 10 seconds. The flagship went dark. Its weapons stopped glowing. Its engines shut down. It was still intact, but it was helpless. Jake fired again, and again, and again. Each beam was perfectly aimed at a different ship. He was not trying to destroy them. He was disabling them. Weapons first, then engines, Then power systems. Clean, surgical strikes that left the ships floating but harmless within 30 seconds. The entire Zephyrian fleet was dead in space. 12 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy had been reduced to metal hulks. But their crews were still alive. Jake had made sure of that. The silence that followed was complete. No one on either side seemed to know what to say. Finally, War Prime Crystal's voice came through the cum. It was different now. Quieter, uncertain. What have you done to us? Jake's reply was simple and direct. I defended my ship and my crew. Your weapons are disabled. Your engines are offline. Your life support is intact. You are alive because I chose to let you live. But how? Our ships are invincible. We have conquered entire star systems with less firepower than we brought against you. Jake thought about that for a moment. Then he said, you brought weapons designed to destroy. I built a system designed to protect. In the end, creation is always stronger than destruction. The Zephyrian fleet floated helplessly in space. The Horizon, undamaged and fully powered, waited to see what would happen next. Jake had won the battle without firing a single shot in anger. Everything he had done was defensive. But the galaxy would never be the same again. News traveled fast through the galaxy. Within days, every major alien civilization had heard about the battle at Kepler 442. The story was simple but shocking. A single human ship had defeated 12 Zephyrian warships without destroying a single one. The Zephyrian Empire, which had never lost a battle, had been stopped by creatures they called soft flesh. Jake Morrison became famous overnight, though he did not want to be. Reporters from across human space sent requests for interviews. Military officials wanted to study his modifications. Scientists begged for access to his designs. Jake ignored them all and went back to work in his engine room. The Horizon stayed in the Kepler 442 system for 2 weeks. The Zephyrian ships could not move, but their crews were safe. Captain Bennett worked with War Prime Crystal to arrange rescue ships. It was strange to see enemies helping each other, but that was how Jake had wanted it. During those 2 weeks, something unexpected happened. War Prime Crystal asked to speak with Jake directly. Not through the cum system, but face to face. Captain Bennett was worried about the meeting, but Jake agreed. He was curious about the Zephyrian commander. They met in the Horizon's shuttle bay. Crystal was even bigger than the pictures had shown. His crystal-covered body reflected the lights, like a living gemstone. His red eyes burned with intelligence and something else. Respect, you are the one called Jake Morrison, Crystal said. His voice was softer now, without the harsh edge of command. I am, Jake replied. He was not intimidated by the alien size. He had seen bigger fusion reactors. You could have destroyed us. Your weapon had the power. Why did you not? Jake thought about the question. Because destruction is wasteful. Your ships were beautiful. Your crews were skilled. It would have been a shame to destroy them. Crystal stared at him for a long moment. In all my campaigns, I have never met an enemy who showed mercy from a position of strength. We Zephyrians respect power, but we honor wisdom. You have both. The two of them walked through the ship together. Jake showed Crystal the engine room and explained his modifications. The Zephyrian commander asked good questions and understood the answers quickly. Jake found himself enjoying the conversation. It was rare to meet someone who appreciated good engineering. Your species builds weapons to destroy, Jake said as they examined the shield generators. We build systems to protect. That gives us an advantage you did not expect. Yes, Crystal agreed. We have conquered many worlds, but we have learned little from them. We take by force and rule by fear. You offer something different. Before Crystal left, he made an unusual request. He wanted copies of Jake's defensive systems. Not to use against humans, but to protect Zephian colonies from other threats. In return, he offered something no human had ever seen. Star maps showing safe routes through dangerous space. Jake agreed, but he had one condition. The Zephyrians could use his designs only for defense, never for attack. Crixtal gave his word as a warrior and commander. Among his people, such promises were never broken. Word of this agreement spread even faster than news of the battle. Other alien species began to take notice of humanity. If the mighty Zephyrian Empire was willing to make deals with humans, maybe. These soft flesh creatures were worth talking to. The first to make contact with a Valkyrie. They were a peaceful species of traders who looked like tall, thin birds. They had been avoiding human space because they thought humans were primitive. Now they sent ambassadors with offers of trade and friendship. Commander Kate Phillips was assigned to meet with the Valkyrie representatives. She had been Jake's classmate at the academy, and she understood the importance of what was happening. The Valkyrie brought gifts of technology and art. They wanted to establish trade, routes between their worlds and human colonies. Your species shows wisdom, the lead Valkyrie ambassador told Kate. The Morrison Protocol demonstrates that humans can be trusted with power. This is rare in the galaxy. Kate had to smile at that. The Morrison Protocol was what military analysts were calling Jake's defensive system. Jake himself had laughed when he heard the name. He said it sounded too fancy for something so simple. More species followed the Valkyrie. The Aquarii, who lived in underwater cities, offered to share their water purification technology. The Crystalline Collective, beings made of living mineral, wanted to exchange knowledge about energy storage. Even the secretive Void Runners began sending coded messages expressing interest in human engineering. But the most significant contact came from an unexpected source. The Thrakari hive mind had been planning to invade human space. They were insect-like creatures who thought in terms of swarms and overwhelming numbers. They had been watching human expansion for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. The battle at Kepler 442 changed their plans completely. The Thrakari realized that humans were not the easy prey they had expected. Instead of invasion, they sent a diplomatic drone with a message of neutrality. They would stay in their own territory if humans stayed in theirs. Dr. Amy Carter, who had been promoted to humanity's first xenocultural ambassador, traveled to many worlds during the months following the battle. She used Jake's story to explain human values to alien civilizations. Humans were strong enough to defend themselves, but wise enough to choose peace when possible. We do not seek to conquer, she told the Galactic Council during her first address. We seek to explore, to learn, and to build. The man who saved our ship at Kepler 442 never spoke of victory or glory. He spoke of protection and creation. This is what humanity offers to the galaxy. The council members, representing dozens of different species, listened carefully. Many of them had never heard of humans before the battle. Now they were considering humanity for membership in the galactic community. Jake himself remained aboard the Horizon, still working in his engine room. Other ships began requesting his help with their defensive systems. Young engineers from across human space applied for transfers just to work with him. Jake accepted a few of them, the ones who were more interested in learning than in becoming. Famous, one of these was a young woman named Beth Taylor. She was fresh from the academy and eager to prove herself. Jake put her to work on routine maintenance and watched how she handled problems. She reminded him of himself at that age, more comfortable with tools than with words. Why do you think everyone wants to study your designs? Beth asked one day while they were calibrating power conduits. Jake paused in his work. Because they want to understand how to defend without destroying. Most species in the galaxy only know how to use force. We showed them there was another way. Do you think it will make a difference? Jake smiled and handed her a circuit tester. It already has. The Zephyrians are using our systems to protect their colonies. The Valkyrie are teaching other species about peaceful trade. The Thrakari chose diplomacy over war. One action led to many others. Beth looked at the complex systems around them. Like an echo. Exactly like an echo, Jake agreed. What we do here echoes across the stars. 5 years had passed since the battle at Kepler 442. Jake Morrison was still aboard the USS Horizon, still working in his engine room, still preferring actions to words. But the galaxy around him had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Morrison Protocol had grown beyond a simple defensive system. Engineers across human space had studied Jake's designs and improved them. They built better shields, more efficient energy storage, and smarter targeting systems. But they all followed Jake's basic rule: protect without destroying when possible. Human colonies that once lived in fear of alien raids now felt safe. The defensive systems Jake had created were installed on space stations, orbital platforms, and colony ships. Pirates and hostile aliens learned to avoid human territory. It was not worth the risk of attacking people who could turn your own weapons against you. Beth Taylor had become one of Jake's best students. She now served as his assistant chief engineer and had developed her own innovations. Her specialty was creating defensive systems for civilian ships. Cargo haulers and passenger transports could now protect themselves without carrying military weapons. The merchant ships loved the new systems, Beth told Jake one morning as they worked on the latest upgrade. Captain Rodriguez from the freighter. New Shanghai says raiders won't even approach his convoy anymore. Word has spread that human ships are too dangerous to attack. Jake nodded while adjusting a power coupling. Good. Peaceful people should be able to travel safely. The Horizon itself had become something of a legend. Young officers requested transfers to serve on the ship where the Morrison Protocol was born. Jake had to interview dozens of applicants every year. He chose carefully, looking for people who understood that engineering was about solving problems, not seeking glory. War Prime Crystal had kept his word about using Jake's systems only for defense. The Zephyrian Empire had installed the modified shields on all their colony worlds. When the Draconian Swarm attacked 3 Zephyrian systems the previous year, the colonies had held out until the Imperial fleet arrived. Thousands of lives were saved, but Crystal had done something even more important. He had changed how the Zephyrian Empire dealt with other species. Instead of demanding tribute or conquest, they now offered protection services. Smaller civilizations could request Zephyrian defensive systems in exchange for trade agreements. It was a new kind of empire, built on cooperation instead of fear. Dr. Amy Carter visited the Horizon regularly in her role as humanity's chief xenocultural ambassador. She brought news from across the galaxy and updates on humanity's growing reputation. Her latest visit carried particularly interesting information. "The Ancients want to meet with you," she told Jake during dinner in the ship's mess hall. Jake looked up from his meal. The Ancients were the oldest known civilization in the galaxy. They had been spacefaring for millions of years, but rarely contacted younger species. Most people doubted they still existed. "What do they want?" Jake asked. They didn't say exactly, but their message mentioned your demonstration of mature wisdom. At Kepler 442, they want to discuss something they call the next phase of galactic development. Captain Lisa Bennett, who was planning to retire soon, shook her head in amazement. 5 years ago, we were running from 12 Zephyrian warships. Now the Ancients want to have a chat. Jake, do you realize what you've accomplished? Jake shrugged. I fixed a problem. That's what engineers do. The meeting with the Ancients took place 2 months later at a neutral space station near the galactic core. The ancient representative was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It looked like a column of shifting light with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jake Morrison of humanity, the ancient said, we have watched your species with great interest. In 5 years, you have changed the balance of power in this galaxy without conquering a single world. This is remarkable. We just defended ourselves, Jake replied. He was not intimidated by beings of pure energy any more than he had been by 8-foot crystal warriors. Yes, but how you defended yourselves matters. We have seen thousands of species rise to galactic prominence. Most do so through war, conquest, or economic domination. You did it by showing restraint and wisdom. You proved that strength and mercy could exist together. The ancient explained that the galaxy was entering a new era. Old empires based on force were failing. Species that learned to cooperate were thriving. Humanity's approach to defense had accelerated this change by decades. We wish to offer humanity membership in the Elder Council, the ancient continued. This is a group of the oldest and wisest civilizations. We guide younger species and prevent galactic wars. Your species has earned this honor. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think you should ask our diplomats about that. I just fix engines. The ancient made a sound that might have been laughter. Jake Morrison, you have done more to bring peace to this galaxy than most diplomats achieve in lifetimes. Your engines, as you call them, have become symbols of hope for countless worlds. Back on the horizon, Jake found that his engine room had become an informal academy. Engineers from many species came to study with him. There were Valkyrie traders learning about power distribution, Aquari technicians working on underwater systems, and even a few young Zephyrians who wanted to understand defensive engineering. One of these students was particularly interesting. Her name was Zara, and she was the daughter of War Prime Crystal. She had come to learn about human engineering but stayed to understand human philosophy. My father says you taught him that victory without honor is meaningless, she told Jake one day. But I think you taught him something more important. You showed him that the greatest victories come from preventing battles, not winning them. Jake handed her a diagnostic tool and pointed to a control panel. Your father learned quickly. The Zephyrian Empire is stronger now than it was when they conquered by force. People respect you because they trust you. As Jake's reputation grew, so did the legend of the quiet engineer who changed the galaxy. Stories were told on 1,000 worlds about the human who defeated 12 warships without firing a shot in anger. Children played games where they pretended to be Jake Morrison, building defenses instead of attacking enemies. But perhaps the most important change was in how species dealt with each other. The Morrison Doctrine, as historians called it, had become a model for interstellar relations. When conflicts arose, civilizations looked for solutions that protected everyone involved. War was becoming the last option instead of the first. Jake himself remained unchanged by his fame. He still worked with his hands, still preferred simple solutions to complex problems, and still believed that the best way to deal with aggression was to make it pointless. When young engineers asked him for advice, he would say the same thing. Every time, build things that last. Protect people who need protection. Fix problems before they become disasters. And remember that the loudest voice in the room is usually not the wisest one. Captain Bennett's replacement, Commander Alex Chun, often watched Jake work and marveled at how one person's actions could have such far-reaching effects. Do you ever think about your legacy? He asked Jake one day. Jake looked up from the quantum drive he was calibrating. I think about tomorrow's maintenance schedule. I think about keeping this ship running safely. I think about the problems we might face next week. That's enough for me. But late at night, when the ship was quiet and most of the crew was sleeping, Jake sometimes stood in the observation lounge and looked out at the stars. He could see ships from dozens of different species traveling peacefully through space. Trade convoys protected by defensive systems based on his designs. Diplomatic vessels carrying messages of cooperation instead of threats. He had been silent when others spoke of war. But what he had done echoed across the galaxy in ways that words never could. And that echo was still growing, spreading to new worlds and new species, carrying a simple message. Creation was stronger than destruction. Protection was more powerful than aggression, and wisdom was worth more than all the weapons in the universe. Jake Morrison had never wanted to be a hero. He had just wanted to fix problems and keep people safe. In the end, that was exactly what made him one.